we're going to do a blind seating today. So basically, we're going to fill the bracket out on the spot as we go, randomly. And once that's done, then we'll put these guys heads up and we'll see where they come out. A couple different rules here that we're going to try to keep in mind. We're going to assume that everyone is healthy and well prepared. We're going to assume when they're across generations that everyone has had been exposed to or had the opportunity for the same level of training, nutrition, education, blah, blah, blah. So the same opportunities. And healthy, prepared, same opportunities. And then we're also going to assume that the the events don't really favor one guy or the other. We're just going to be they need to show up ready to go, and it's kind of like who would be the most prepared no matter what the events would be. So event independent. So with that being said, I guess we need to start filling this bracket out. So basically what we have here is we have all 24 world's strongest men, and then we had 8 spots remaining. All right, Magnus Samuelsson gets the first spot on our bracket. All right, so round 1, Magnus Samuelsson versus Yaroslav Dimick. Are we ready to make a? Are we ready to put someone in there, or do we need to consult the statistics machine? We'll go with Magnus. All right, Gary Taylor versus Tom Stoltman. No debate here. It's Tom Stoltman, right? All right, Hafthor Bjornsson versus John Paul Sigmarsson. Yeah, when these guys came off the board against one another a minute ago, when we were seeding this thing, I was like, oh boy. You figure both of these guys would at least be in like your quote unquote Sweet 16. Um, oh boy. All right. Hafthor it is. And right off the bat, we have a 4-time World's Strongest Man winner who isn't escaping round 1. Wow. Wow. All right, then we've got Magnus Magnuson versus Luke Stoltman. So Magnus, right? So we've got 2 Magnuses moving on. Are you guys? Do you guys want to overrule me and make older brother go there, or are you guys fine with me? All right. So moving on from leg 1 into the Sweet 16 will be Magnus Samuelsson, Tom Stoltman, Hafthor Bjornsson, and Magnus Vermagnuson. Now we go into leg 2, and we have Nick Best versus Vasil Verstuk. So 3 votes for Vasil, no votes for Nick. We'll go with Vasil. All right. And then we have Mitchell Hooper versus Yanni Virtanen. And this is a win for Canada. And if you guys tell me that you want Yanni here, this is where the veto power comes out because I'm not advancing. Mitchell Hooper. Oh, look, I see what you did. I see what I did. Uh, I'm giving Mitchell the win in the next round, even without moving him on. uh, yeah, he has to go in the right line there. There's no buys in the Sweet 16, Mitchell. Nice try. Do you see Mitchell trying to sneak in there and go to the Elite Eight without having to compete? All right, Brian Shaw versus Phil Fister. Big Brian, right? Then we have Marius Pudzianowski versus JF Caron, and we've got to go with Puds. No disrespect to JF. Um, but we got to go with Pudzianowski. Um, Undoubtedly, if this was event based, we can find a path to move on from JF Caron against most of these guys, probably any of these guys with the right set of events. But if we're talking about best chance to win just showing up, not knowing what's on the table, it's Pudzianowski. That means we're going to have a showdown between Marius and Brian Shaw. Ouch, 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 ouch. All right. So now we're on to our third leg. Mark Felix versus Bruce Wilhelm. The guy who competed forever versus the guy who won it first. What do you guys want to do here? For Mark Felix, and a third vote for Mark Felix. I'm not going to veto that. I probably would have picked Mark as well. So there we go. Mark Felix moves on. Then we have Bill Kazmaier versus Eddie Hall. You guys might fight with me on this one, and I might not care. um, I know what my vote is. Next up, we have Jeff Capes versus Finn Carlson. And give it Jeff Capes. Then we have the guy I used to cheer for every year when Kaz was gone, Harriet Badenhorst, versus the second ever World's Strongest Man, Don Reinhout. It's almost hard. Um, it's almost hard here for me to vote. I need to listen to you guys a little bit here because I mean I was a huge Garrett Badenhorst fan. I used to get so aggravated that he never won. Badenhorst is getting enough votes now that I feel like I can put him in there without feeling like it's just because I wanted to. Hopefully, I didn't twist too many arms or convince you guys with my comments there. But I always thought that Garrett Badenhorst was a phenomenal strongman, just kind of unlucky or just a hair below where he needed to be. So this completes our our Sweet 16 from the third leg. So moving on, it's going to be Mark Felix squaring off against Bill Kazmaier, Jeff Capes versus Garrett Badenhorst. And now we go to our final leg of the competition. Leg number 4. We have Jamie Reeves versus Alexei Novikov. And we're all going to agree this is Alexei, right? Do we all agree? If we don't all agree, it doesn't matter because my veto power says Alexei wins this one. But I'm assuming we're all going to agree that Alexei takes this. Then we have Terry Hollins versus Martins Licis. And I don't want to tell you guys how to think here. There might be some votes for Terry. Could very well be some votes for Terry. But I think it's Martins pretty easily against most people with the way that we're doing this too. And the reason I say this, you guys will probably be thinking like me, or maybe you won't. You either will or you won't. Kind of the way thoughts work. Um, but my thinking here is one of the reasons that a competition like this is tailor made for Martins is the way that we've set this up. Not knowing what they're competing in, um, versatility, well roundedness. He's just so consistent. Martins, and he competes well. He doesn't train that well a lot of times, but he shows up to competition and he's so consistent in everything he does. So you've got to go with Martins Licis. And these are the types of contests tailor made for the Dragon. He is Mr. Consistency and Mr. Versatility. Now, that is going to be quite the battle, though, because everything I just said about Martins applies to Alexei sometimes. Alexei overachieves a lot. He also falters sometimes. But that's going to be a heck of a battle when we get to that one. Next, we've got Big Laws versus Ted Vandepar. What are we doing in Big Laws versus Ted Vandepar? Seems like Laws is sweeping this. No, not much love for Ted Vandepar. So, I will agree. I would have picked him anyway. And then in our final battle, we have Yoko Ahola versus Zadrunas Savickas. Let me think about this one. This is Oh man. Oh. Ooh, the pain. Okay. All right. So here's our Sweet 16, guys. Magnus Samuelsson, Tom Stoltman, Hafthor Bjornsson, Magnus Vermagnuson, Vasil Verstuk, Mitchell Hooper, Brian Shaw, Marius Pudzianowski, Mark Felix, Bill Kazmaier, Jeff Capes, Garrett Badenhorst, Alexei Novikov, Martins Licis, Big Laws, and Big Z. So we've got two big guys there. Big Laws, Big Z. They're all big. Laurent Chalet versus Zadrunas Savickas. Time to kick off the Sweet 16. Whew. I gotta dry off here. The sweat is pouring down. The anticipation is killing me. The nerves are jumping. It's hard to contain all of this excitement. All right. All right, guys. Let's kick this off with the first battle. Magnus Samuelsson versus Tom Stoltman. We're going with Tom Stoltman over Magnus Samuelsson, right? Tom Stoltman it is. We had one Magnus vote. It's not enough to sway it. Not enough to change my opinion either, because I was on the Stoltman camp. So Tom moves on. Now we go to Laurent Chalet versus Zadrunas Savickas. It's Big Z, right? Right? All right. Now we're going to go over here, and this is the big battle. Oh my gosh, you guys ready for this one? This is the big one, guys. Now it's Brian Shaw versus Marius Pudzianowski. Brian Shaw versus Marius Pudzianowski. I'm going to let you guys fight for about 35 minutes, and then I'll ring in with the final answer. 4-time winner versus 5-time winner. I am on record as saying that Marius is underrated and underappreciated. I'm also on record as saying that I also underrate and don't appreciate Marius. And Brian Shaw is one of my favorites of all time. Let's take opinions out and let's go to Strongman Archives for a little bit of help here. This is such a big battle. This is an important battle, too. You got 5-time winner versus 4-time winner here. There's no way for us to be right here. It's all opinion based anyway. Okay, Marius Pudzianowski, 43 wins out of 61 international. 7 wins out of 8 nationally. 9-time finalist, 5-time winner. Brian Shaw, 26 wins in 64 contests. 2 national titles out of 3. 16 appearances at the World's Strongest Man. 15 finals, 4 victories. 15 finals is insane. So here we go. We have made a decision. Big Brian moves on. Big Brian moves on. And a 5-time winner and record holder for most WSN victories, has been eliminated from the competition. Brian Shaw wins and moves on in our bracket. Which you guys didn't get to see me put him on there. Boom, boom. Just pretend you watch me fill that out. And we've got Mark Felix versus Bill Kazmaier. And I'm just going to go ahead and answer on behalf of everyone. And if you guys disagree, well, you lose. My veto power wins because it's Bill Kazmaier, and that's all there is to talk about. There's nothing more that needs to be said. Bill Kazmaier wins. Hafthor versus Magnus Magnuson. In round one-time winner Hafthor Bjornsson defeated four-time winner John Paul Sigmarsson. In the second round, Hafthor's reward for doing that is to take on another four-time winner, Magnus Magnuson. Can the legend Magnus move on? Or does Hafthor get back-to-back four title scalps? Thor versus Magnus Magnuson. The crowd has spoken. The legend gets unseated by the mountain. Hafthor Bjornsson moves on to the Elite Eight. So now, Hafthor has only won one World's Strongest Man, but he has just defeated 8 World's Strongest Man titles in 2 rounds. Now we go to the other side, the other corner. This means this is another good contest here. But now it's Alexei Novikov versus Martins Licis. And I'm assuming there's going to be some debate here. I'm assuming that Alexei versus Martins is not going to be a slam dunk for either guy. Someone's not going to be happy. They can't both move on. I'm making the call. My stream, my call. I love them both. It hurts me to pick one over the other. They're 2 of my favorites. It's the Dragon. Martins moves on. It doesn't matter. Either one of them is squaring off against Big Z in the next round, so... okay. Up next, we go across the diamond, and we have Mitchell Hooper versus Vasil Verestuk. And this is Mitchell Hooper, right? We do have a vote for Vasil. We do have a vote for Vasil. But it seems like most people are saying Mitchell Hooper, and I'm saying Mitchell Hooper. And so, Mitchell Hooper it is. That means we only have one battle left. And then we will know who is in our Elite Eight. It's Jeff Capes versus Garrett Badenhorst. And again, I'm going to shut my mouth because of my bias for Badenhorst, and I'm only going to speak up if you guys are deadlocked or I hear you saying some really outlandish things. All right. So, I think we've got enough information here to determine that this is going to shape up the way it did when I used to follow Garrett's career. I always cheered for him. I never got to smile at the end of the day because he never could get over the hump and win. He doesn't here either. Jeff Capes moves on. So it's it. We're done. It's over. We come into the Sweet 16 being done. What drama! What excitement! Elite 8 time. Tom Stoltman versus Hafthor Bjornsson. Mitchell Hooper versus Brian Shaw. Bill Kazmaier versus Jeff Capes in a battle of the old guys in Yesterday Land. And then Martins Licis versus Zydrunas Savickas. Don't know if this is what you guys were expecting or not, but that's where we're at. Down to the Elite 8. We're going top left corner, bottom right corner. Bottom left corner, top right corner. Tom Stoltman versus Hafthor Bjornsson. Lock in your votes. Thor over Tom. Thor over Tom. Thor over Tom. Thor is just better than Tom. Or less. Simon always says 2 things, and I keep thinking there's 2 votes. Thor, and then Bradley says Tom. I think this one is much, much, much closer than people would think. I think it's way closer than people would think. I think that Tom is underappreciated and not very well liked for things that are beyond his control sometimes. Um, I think people's dislike and displeasure for Colin Bryce and certain things rub off on how they feel about Tom. I think the fact that Tom doesn't really seem to care about other events and only cares about the World's Strongest Man rubs a lot of people the wrong way. But I mean, who is anyone to tell someone what to care about? What we do know is when he does care, he shows up and he does really well. Um, I think it's a much, much closer battle than people would think. But I don't think it's enough for me to overrun the crowd. I do not think it's enough for that to happen. Hafthor moves on, and he is in your final four. So again, let's just take a look. Let's just take a look at what Hafthor has done in our mock tournament here. In round one, he beat a four-time winner. In round two, he beat a four-time winner. In round three, he beat a two-time winner who has been on the podium the last several years in a row, just finished second a couple days ago, won the thing the 2 years in a row after that. Hafthor just beat this guy and wasn't even competing against the guy who's on top of the sport right now, essentially. He has one World's Strongest Man victory, and he has bested 10 World's Strongest Man titles so far. Pretty impressive for Hafthor in our tournament. Now we go down to the bottom right corner. It's Martins Licis versus Zydrunas Savickas. I know what my pick is. Well, Big Z is Martin's hero. Big Z is Martin's idol. Does Martins upset his hero and idol, or does he fall to the man that he calls master? That's what's at play right now. And I'm going to say that there's a reason that Martins looks up to Big Z. It's because he wants to pass him. And he's probably a better athlete. And by probably, I mean he is. But we're talking strongman. We're not talking athlete. Big Z wins this thing. Martins will continue to call Big Z his hero, his idol, his master. So now we go to the left side of the pond here, or our screen. We have Brian Shaw versus Mitchell Hooper. So we have sustained greatness versus modern unthinkableness. Which do we give it to? Do we favor a guy who is currently doing things that we've never seen before? Or do we favor a guy who did stuff that we have rarely seen before for a really long time? I don't know that I agree with Carter there that Prime Shaw would have beat Mitch this. I don't think so. I think Mitchell Hooper was just unbeatable this year. Do I see Hooper as the future? Well, yeah, I mean, it's hard not to, really, but he's not just the future, he's the present. I feel, to be honest, even though I don't think there's anything wrong with what Simon said. I don't think there's anything wrong with what Simon said. He is keeping it simple enough to me. Personally, I think this one is much closer than people think, or much closer. I think that Simon is right. I think that what other people have said is right, too. To me, Mitchell Hooper, Brian Shaw is kind of like Martins Licis versus Alexei Novikov. I will listen to arguments for either guy. Now, Alexei versus Martins is close for a completely different reason than Mitchell Hooper versus Brian Shaw. But what I mean is, I think either answer is valid. I think either answer is a good answer. But I'm going to agree with the crowd here. And choose Brian Shaw to move on into our final four. But I will say this. I'm only doing it for the same reason I didn't put Mitchell Hooper in my Gods of Strength in the tier video yesterday, or in the A+, because it's been such a short window. To me, that makes what he's done that much more amazing, kind of like Simon Dean is saying, that he's done this out of nowhere, with no experience, no practice, no long build. It just, boom, he just arrived and did stuff. That makes what he's done more impressive, but I also want to see more. I have not seen enough to allow him to go on over someone who has been in 15 finals, won 4 of them, has one of the greatest win-loss percentages in the sport. We have one more, and then we have a final 4. It's Bill Kazmaier versus Jeff Capes. I don't think this one is as hard a decision as Mitchell Hooper versus Brian Shaw. It certainly isn't for me, because one guy is my favorite strongman of all time, and the other isn't. That's it, guys. The Elite 8 is done. We now have a Final 4. Who is moving on to the Final 4? Bill Kazmaier, Zydrunas Savickas, Hafthor Bjornsson, and Brian Shaw. That's our Final 4. So we're going to go over here now. It's Thor versus Brian Shaw. Thor versus Brian Shaw. What are we doing here, guys? Here we go. Heads, Brian Shaw. Okay, Brandon came in now. Okay. Tails, Thor. Head, Shaw. Tails, Thor. Head, tails. Heads it is. Brian Shaw moves on. The only fair way to decide a competition of who's better. It's the only fair way. All right. And that means we only have one Final 4 battle left before we get to see two guys duke it out for who is our ultimate bracket, blind bracket, no seeding, our ultimate blind bracket champion. Before we get to the champion, we have to see Big Kaz and Big Z throw down. Who are we giving? Who moves on? Arguably, what most people would say, the greatest strongman of all time, Big Z, or what a fewer people say, the greatest strongman of all time, the guy I pick, Big Kaz, my favorite. But here we go. Not all about me. It's not all about me. Zydrunas versus Kaz. I think that's what Simon just said is what has always made me. I mean, there's a lot of reasons I'm a Bill Kazmaier fan, but that's it. He was just so much ahead of his time. I'd never seen anything like it before until this past week with what Mitchell Hooper did. It reminded me of Kazmaier in that he just seems so much further ahead of his peers in this competition. Yes, Kaz didn't compete against the competition level that these guys did. But he was so far ahead of them that it wasn't even entertaining. Similar to Mitchell Hooper, he just looks so far above these guys now. And there's two ways to look at that while you guys are answering. While you guys are answering stuff, I'm just going to go ahead and throw this out there. When someone is from a time period where the competition's not that high, that would be Bill Kazmaier, not for Big Z. Big Z was when there's a lot of competition. There's two ways to look at that. You can give the guy who had the tougher competition credit, and most people do, because he had to beat them, right? On the other side, there's this mental thing where athletes like to be pushed. The best rises up. The best likes a challenge. How good could Kazmaier have been if he was challenged? Maybe he was not as impressive as he could have been because he didn't need to be that impressive. And so all of these things I think are worth talking about. I think here's the answer. Zydrunas Savickas. So here's what's really interesting. I love this. I love it coming down to Big Z versus Brian Shaw. Just like I talked about in the tier video, which I don't know if any of you guys watched that or not. But what's interesting about it is this is a battle that we have seen a lot of times. This is a battle where we have seen one guy win sometime, the other guy win sometime, right? As I talked about in my video, they're both gods of strength. Just sort of that competition thing that I was just talking about that Bill Kazmaier didn't have. One of the things that probably made Brian Shaw, as good as he was Zydrunas Savickas. And one of the things that probably made Zydrunas Savickas as good as he is and was is Brian Shaw. They had that competition. They had that challenger that dared you to come back and answer and go to a higher level. They were unlucky to compete against one another because no telling how many titles either one would have if it wasn't for the other. But that same thing that makes them unlucky to face each other also made them incredibly lucky because their legacies are always going to be linked to one another, and they probably pushed each other to higher levels of greatness. It's interesting, almost poetic, that our 32 would come down to Brian Shaw and Zydrunas Savickas, considering how many times these guys locked horns with one another. Here's something worth talking about too. Savickas' last time that he stood on the podium was in 2015. The last time that Zydrunas Savickas stood on the podium was 2015. The first time that Zydrunas Savickas stood on the podium was 2012 or 2002. 2002, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. That's 14 years that Zydrunas Savickas was among the 3 best in the world. For Brian Shaw, he stood on his first podium in 2009. His last one in 2021. It's virtually identical, really. One more year of sustainability for Big Z. I think this is phenomenal. I think this is awesome. Personally, I love this. All right, guys. I've heard your answers. I have my own thoughts. I have my own bias. I'm an American. I'm a Big Z fan. We flipped a coin in the semis. Do we flip a coin in the final? No, we don't. No, we don't. We go ahead and say that our winner is Zydrunas Savickas. Wins our tournament. Our 32-man heads up blind seeded bracket. It's all over. Let the tears fall in my hands. Cuss me out now. Tell me how terrible I am. You guys have yourselves to blame a lot because I listened to you many times. When all the counting is done and all the tears have dried, Zydrunas Savickas wins our tournament. He is our greatest strongman of all time by virtue of our blind seeded bracket. It's over. It's over. It's over. It's over. Big Z wins it all. Exciting stuff.